A resonant thwack shattered the hum of conversations inside the bustling International Departures Hall of Kotoka Airport in Accra, where travelers from across the globe milled about beneath high ceilings and gleaming informational displays. The sound, as jarring as a cymbal crash, triggered a collective pause. Voices halted mid-syllable, suitcases rolled to a stop, and phone screens flickered unnoticed in startled hands. A wail erupted, an infant's cry that rose in panic, stirring the quiet into a sudden frenzy of alarmed stares. At the epicenter of this explosion of tension stood a petite Kenyan woman, cradling a red-faced baby whose cries now escalated in distress. Looming over her, an older white woman with silver blonde hair and sharp features glowered through her tinted bifocals, one hand still raised in the aftermath of the slap she had just delivered. "I told you, keep that child quiet," she spat, her cultured accent vibrating with indignation. Passengers nearby recoiled. No one had expected a brazen act of violence in the ordinarily tedious wait before boarding. A West African ground staffer in a royal blue uniform rushed toward the commotion, clutching the walkie-talkie at her hip. Several security officers stationed near the automated check-in kiosks began weaving through the crowd. But it was the Kenyan woman's reaction, her eyes wide and fierce, angled up at her assailant, that spoke louder than the infant's cries. Though shock pulsed visibly in her quivering lips, she refused to cower. Instead, she tightened her hold on the baby, whose tear-streaked cheeks trembled with sobs. "You have no idea what you've just done," the young mother said softly, a hint of steel in her measured tone. Before the older woman could sneer a retort, a swirl of movement drew everyone's attention toward the VIP entrance, where the famously dynamic CEO of Amani Air had just stepped into view. Flanked by several corporate representatives in tailored suits, he scanned the area in disbelief as onlookers parted to reveal the unfolding drama. His expression morphed from confusion to dread as soon as he recognized the woman with the baby. "Zawadi," he called out urgently, voice echoing across the marble floors. "Are you hurt? What happened?" In that moment, the older woman's flushed face contorted in a flash of realization. The woman she had assaulted was married to Rami Okoye, a powerful airline executive known across the continent for his business acumen and philanthropic efforts. A hush descended, punctuated only by the baby's hiccuping cries. The older woman took a step back, color draining from her cheeks under the overhead lights. Security officers finally closed in, their presence stirring new layers of consequence into the thickening air. And as the baby's sobs began to soften, the older woman understood with sickening clarity that her impulsive violence had triggered a sequence of repercussions well beyond a mere traveler's complaint. If you're here for a gripping story, drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're reading from. A jovial voice might urge at a moment like this, but truly, who could think of clicking buttons amid such a dramatic turn? Yet stories, even tense ones, can bring us together to share what moves us. So if this moment has already pulled you in, take a second later to show your support. Now journey back with me a few hours earlier to the vibrant residential district of OSU in Accra, where the morning sun was just beginning to strike the pale stucco walls of an airy penthouse apartment. Inside its bright, modern living space, Dr. Zawadi Mwangi double-checked the straps of her baby carrier, ensuring her daughter, 4-month-old Tamika, was snugly cradled against her. Beams of lemony dawn light filtered in through tall windows, illuminating the sleek furnishings Rami had picked out when he first moved to Ghana for an international expansion of Amani Air. Zawadi smiled at the memory of that transitional phase. She had been finishing her surgical residency in Nairobi. He had been juggling the demands of an airline on the brink of dramatic growth. Yet somehow they'd managed a wedding and begun building a life that spanned borders. "Dr. Mwangi," called out a voice from the kitchen, "are you sure you won't need an extra pair of hands?" It was Irene, the couple's longtime housekeeper and family friend, currently busy stocking a diaper bag the size of a small duffel. "This flight is going to be full, especially on a Friday morning, and Tamika might get fussy with the pressure changes." "We'll manage," Zawadi assured her, adjusting Tamika's position so the baby's round face peeked over the top of the carrier. "Rami is sending a driver to meet us at the terminal. I'll let the flight staff know I'm traveling alone with an infant. they'll usually help out. It still felt surreal for Zawadi to claim any special support. In her role as a pediatric surgeon at a high-profile children's hospital in Nairobi, she prided herself on her professional independence. Yet traveling with a newborn was another realm of complexity. Besides, she added with a grin, Tamika has flown twice already. She might as well start collecting more miles. Irene handed over the bulging diaper bag, complete with extra changes of baby clothes, formula, wipes, a foldable changing mat, and a small plush giraffe that Tamika gnawed whenever she was teething. Just in case, I also packed a fresh top for you. Babies love to make a mess at the worst times. Zawadi laughed softly, thanked Irene, and made her way to the foyer where the final item, her carry-on, rested next to the front door. She did a quick mental checklist: passport, phone loaded with electronic boarding passes, wallet, keys, baby's travel documentation. Satisfied, she turned to Irene once more. We'll be home on Sunday. Rami says he'll wrap up his big meeting tomorrow and then join us in Kumasi for that medical fundraiser. I'll message you updates. Irene followed to open the door, giving Tamika a gentle pat on the back. Safe travels. You too, take care. The ride to Kotoka Airport was unexpectedly smooth, with minimal traffic along the newly widened roads. Their chauffeur, a soft-spoken man named Sadiq, took care to avoid sudden stops, knowing how easily a jolt could upset a baby. Zawadi watched the city blur past outside her window. Bustling vendors setting up roadside stalls, motos weaving through gaps in traffic, and the distinctive swirl of daily life in Accra, a city she had come to love deeply. Is it your first time flying alone with the baby, madam? Sadiq asked politely as he eased into the airport's drop-off lane. It's my first time traveling with her without Rami, Zawadi admitted. But we'll be fine. She's already proven to be quite a resilient traveler. She gets that from you, I'm sure, Sadiq replied kindly, stepping out to help unload. Zawadi offered a friendly goodbye, then slipped Tamika's sun hat over her wispy curls before entering the bustling terminal. Lines of travelers snaked past check-in counters and automated kiosks. Flight schedules blinked overhead, revealing departures to far-flung destinations. The lighting was bright and modern, and the midday throng was alive with a swirl of various languages. Unwilling to pull rank or mention her husband's high-profile position, Zawadi joined the standard queue for check-in at the Amani Air counter. Still, the agent recognized her, likely from internal bulletins or Rami's public addresses, greeted her warmly, and processed their boarding passes with practice speed. Good morning, Dr. Mwangi. Headed to Lubumbashi today. Yes, she replied, adjusting Tamika's little hat. I'm meeting my husband for a few days, then continuing on to a medical fundraiser in Kumasi. The agent placed a small infant in arms tag on Tamika's carrier. We'll board in about an hour at gate 17. There's a family pre-board available if you need extra time or assistance. Thank you, said Zawadi, gathering her travel documents. I really appreciate your help. Past security, a slightly tedious process involving removing Tamika from a carrier so security officers could scan it. Zawadi made her way toward gate 17. She was relieved to see a relatively open seating area. Though the flight was rumored to be full, it seemed some travelers had yet to arrive. Eager to keep Tamika comfortable, Zawadi chose a seat near a panoramic window overlooking the busy tarmac. Aircrafts were lining up in orchestrated precision. Ground crews scurried around refueling hoses and baggage carts. Tamika squirmed, beginning the rhythmic fuss that foretold hunger. Smiling, Zawadi settled her in the cradle of one arm and prepared a small bottle of formula, mindful of the watchful eyes of older travelers who offered supportive nods. Mid-feed, Tamika let out a boisterous baby burp, causing nearby passengers to chuckle sympathetically. But among the crowd shuffling through gate 17 was a tall figure who offered no such warmth. An older woman, wearing a cream-colored blazer and matching skirt, walked with a posture of pronounced entitlement. Her hair, meticulously coiffed into a neat bob, was an unmistakable shock of platinum. She paused briefly, scanning the rows of waiting passengers, a subtle curl of distaste twisting her lips. Then her line of sight landed on Zawadi's seat, more precisely, on the open seat directly adjacent. Without so much as a greeting, the woman planted herself there, rummaging in her designer handbag with an air of impatience. Zawadi, busy burping Tamika, offered a polite nod, but the older woman didn't acknowledge the gesture. Instead, she pursed her lips at the baby's small whimpers, then fixed her gaze on some imaginary point far off in the terminal. A minute later, an announcement broadcast that families traveling with infants or anyone needing extra assistance would soon be able to pre-board. Zawadi gently stood, repositioning Tamika against her shoulder. The older woman heaved a theatrical sigh, rose to her feet, and simultaneously jerked her carry-on, nearly colliding with Zawadi. The baby let out a startled squeak. "Careful, please," Zawadi said calmly. "You almost hit my daughter." The older woman sniffed, eyes flicking disdainfully across Tamika. "Perhaps keep your child under control, then." The icy remark hung in the air for a moment. Zawadi took a slow breath. She had encountered plenty of condescension in her life, as both a Kenyan forging a medical career among older expatriates and as the wife of a prominent CEO. But she measured her response with civility. "She's a baby. We're managing as best we can." The older woman offered nothing further, stomping off toward the gate agent. Zawadi, eyebrows arched, wondered how someone could exude that level of rudeness so effortlessly. A few minutes later, once pre-boarding started, Zawadi moved to the designated line with Tamika dozing in her arms. The flight attendants politely guided her to her seat in business class, an area her husband had insisted she reserve for greater comfort with the baby. As Zawadi settled, a steward named Kwame offered a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Mwangi. May I help with your bag?" "Yes, please," she said, handing over the diaper bag. "Thank you so much." Kwame secured it in an overhead bin, then returned with a bottle of water and a small pillow. "If you need anything else, let us know." Zawadi nodded, grateful. She fastened her seat belt around Tamika's carrier, just as the rest of the cabin began to fill. The hush of well-appointed seats, soft lighting, and the gentle whir of air conditioning created a comfortable environment, until the older white woman from the waiting area reappeared. It turned out they were in the same section of the plane, just a row apart. The woman placed her bag overhead, lowered her tinted glasses, and gave Zawadi a searing, appraising look before seating herself on the aisle. A wave of tension seeped into the cabin. "Folks," an attendant's voice came over the PA. "If this story is already sparking your emotions, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know if you've ever seen drama unfold while traveling. It's a conversation worth having." Of course, real life has no comment section, but let's be honest, we've all had that urge to share our outrage when we witness injustice. The flight pushback was smooth, yet Tamika stirred, unsettled by the vibrations in the cabin. She began to whimper softly, and Zawadi gently tried to comfort her with a pacifier. It worked for a short time, but as the engines revved for takeoff, Tamika's cries grew more urgent, no doubt from the shifting cabin pressure in her sensitive ears. Zawadi braced herself, drawing on her knowledge as a surgeon who had studied infant anatomy. Crying was an inevitability for some babies during takeoff, and the best she could do was offer gentle rocking and let Tamika suck on a pacifier or bottle to ease the pressure. Most people in business class didn't seem fazed. A father of 3 seated nearby gave Zawadi a thumbs up, likely empathizing with the trials of traveling with a small child. The older woman, however, spun around in her seat, glaring at the crying baby. Her expression was a thundercloud of disapproval. Over the roar of engine thrust, Zawadi caught the words selfish and disgraceful, though the rest was swallowed by mechanical noise. The plane lifted off, soared above the coastline, and leveled out amid golden morning clouds. Once the seatbelt sign blinked off, a flight attendant moved through the cabin offering beverages. Zawadi managed to get Tamika to latch onto a small bottle, and the baby's cries subsided to a few ragged hiccups. "You might at least try to be more considerate," came a crisp voice from behind her. Zawadi turned to find the older white woman leaning into the aisle, her face set in a look of cultivated outrage. "Pardon," Zawadi said evenly. "I'm doing my best." "Are you?" the woman countered, adjusting her designer scarf. I have critical business to review, and your child's disruption is intolerable. Such noise belongs at home, not in a premium cabin." Zawadi exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry if my baby's crying disturb you, but children have every right to fly." "Right," the older woman hissed, "but an obligation to manage them properly." Several passengers nearby exchanged incredulous glances, though no one interjected yet. Zawadi, maintaining a composed tone, replied, "She's been fed, changed, and comforted. Sometimes, babies cry regardless of a parent's effort." The older woman scoffed, then snapped open a newspaper with a flourish, effectively dismissing any further conversation. Zawadi's cheeks burned, but she refused to let the woman's hostility poison her trip. Instead, she focused on Tamika, who was now lulled by the flight's hum, drifting back to sleep. The next hour passed in a fragile peace. Zawadi managed to sip a cup of ginger tea, careful not to disturb the baby. The older woman tapped furiously at a tablet, occasionally tossing an irritated glance over her shoulder whenever Tamika let out a soft coo. A few rows up, an older Ghanaian gentleman, traveling in a crisp pilot's uniform but clearly off-duty, watched the tension unfold with sympathy in his eyes. He greeted Zawadi with a nod at one point, perhaps as a silent show of solidarity, but avoided openly challenging the fractious traveler behind them. Then, as if on cue, Tamika woke with a jerk, cheeks reddening in that telltale sign of building discomfort. Zawadi tested the diaper, slightly wet, and realized she should head to the lavatory to change it before the meltdown grew. With Tamika shifting restlessly, Zawadi unbuckled and stood, only to find the older white woman also standing in the narrow aisle, rummaging in the overhead for something. Their eyes met, and Zawadi calmly said, "Excuse me, I need to pass through for the lavatory." The older woman didn't move aside. "Take a different route," she snapped, though there was no other route in the cabin. The standoff was immediate. Tamika gave a plaintive whimper. Zawadi, determined not to escalate, tried again. "Please let me by. The baby needs a diaper change." The older woman's lip curled. "You people always expect the world to accommodate you," she retorted, voice dripping with condescension. Zawadi's heart pounded. She'd heard prejudice in many forms, but encountering it so blatantly, especially when Tamika was right there, was like a flare of white-hot tension. She forced her voice to stay level. "I'm asking for something quite simple and reasonable, ma'am." "Don't you ma'am me," the older woman snapped. "Learn to keep that little one silent, or don't fly at all." Then, in a horrifying burst of anger, she struck out. Her open palm whipped across Zawadi's cheek, producing that shocking crack that would reverberate in Zawadi's memory for days. The entire row went rigid. Passengers gasped. Tamika's cry erupted into a wail. Zawadi stumbled back, pressing one hand to her stinging face, eyes blazing despite the tears welling. The older woman blinked, as though uncertain even she believed she'd done it. But the deed was done. A flight attendant dashed up the aisle, followed by the off-duty pilot in uniform. Several startled passengers rose half out of their seats. "What on earth is going on?" shouted Kwame, voice taut. "This lady she attacked her," exclaimed a woman behind them. The older white woman stood ramrod stiff, her hand still trembling from the force of the blow. She was blocking the aisle, she tried to assert, though her tone wavered. "That child, she was harassing me." Kwame gave her a sharp, disbelieving look. "Ma'am, you just struck a passenger who's carrying an infant." At that, Zawadi inhaled, collecting herself, hugging Tamika tight even as the baby's cries fractured the moment. "You made a dangerous choice," Zawadi said, voice trembling but resolute. "A far more serious mistake than you realize." The older woman's retort lodged in her throat, overshadowed by the sudden arrival of two uniformed flight marshals who had been summoned from the flight deck. "You need to move to the galley now," one commanded, gesturing for the older woman to step away. "Violence on board is a criminal matter." For an instant, the older woman simply gawked, as though she couldn't fathom that her station in life wouldn't protect her from the consequences. But the flight marshals were unyielding. As Zawadi stood there, cradling her sobbing child, the pilot who had rushed forward placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come, let's get you to a quieter spot." We'll make sure you receive assistance." Zawadi nodded, still dazed. Tears now sliding down her cheeks, partly from the sting of the slap and partly from the surge of protective fury coursing through her veins. She followed the pilot to a curtained-off crew area. Kwame joined them, offering an ice pack. "I'm so sorry you experienced this," he said gently, scanning the bright red mark on her cheek. "Are you okay? Does the baby need a doctor?" My daughter is just scared," Zawadi answered. She felt Tamika's heartbeat thudding in frantic pulses against her chest. "I'm okay physically, but that woman, she actually slapped me." Her voice trembled with both rage and disbelief. In all her experiences, operating in hectic Kenyan hospitals, traveling for advanced surgical training, presenting at global medical conferences, never she'd been physically attacked because of her child's cries. The pilot introduced himself as Captain Jibbo. "I'm not on duty," he said, "just traveling home after my rotation, but I witnessed enough. We'll ensure you can file a report." Kwame nodded. "We've alerted the cockpit and the ground authorities in Lubumbashi. Police will meet the plane. The passenger who assaulted you has already been separated from the cabin." As he said this, Zawadi's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw a text from Rami. "Cannot wait to see you too. Car arranged at Lubumbashi arrivals. I'll be outside the gate if possible. Love you both." She stared at the text, heart twisting. He had no idea what had just transpired. She typed out a quick response, choosing her words carefully so as not to alarm him. "Baby and I are safe, but an incident occurred. Airline staff handling it. We'll explain when we land. Love you too." The remainder of the flight blurred into a haze of routine procedures overshadowed by the throb on Zawadi's cheek and the swirl of adrenaline that refused to subside. She changed Tamika's diaper in the rear lavatory, hands shaking slightly, then spent the rest of the flight in a jump seat near the crew area, away from the tension of the business class cabin. Occasional announcements came over the speakers, reminding passengers to remain calm and that the situation was being dealt with according to protocol. Meanwhile, the older woman was kept under watch by the flight marshals in a seat far from other travelers. The final descent into Lubumbashi brought no respite from Zawadi's mounting apprehension. How would Rami react when he saw the mark on her face? Would the woman try to flee? What legal steps would have to unfold? Tamika, sensing her mother's tension, refused to fully settle, fussing through the seatbelt signs illumination and the final landing procedures. When the aircraft finally taxied to the gate and powered down, an announcement came. "Passengers, please remain seated until instructed otherwise. We have authorities meeting our arrival to address a situation." True to their word, the flight attendants ushered Zawadi off the plane first. Tamika, now dozing fitfully, pressed her small face against Zawadi's collarbone. As soon as they entered the jet bridge, uniformed airport police and Amani Air security personnel formed a small half-circle. And standing just behind them, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit, was Rami himself. Zawadi felt relief flood her chest at the sight of him, yet guilt nagged in her mind. Guilt that his big day of negotiations might be disrupted by this fiasco. "Zawadi," he said in a tone laced with alarm, stepping around the officers to reach her side. "You're injured. Who did this?" His eyes flicked to Tamika, making sure she looked physically unharmed. "We're all right," Zawadi managed, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "Just shaken." Before she could elaborate, the older white woman emerged under guard, her wrists cuffed in front of her. She froze upon seeing Rami, her posture deflating as the final puzzle piece fell into place. In a flash, she recognized him as the CEO of Amani Air, the very airline on which she had just committed a violent assault. Her mouth quivered, and words died in her throat. Rami's protective fury ignited. "Is this the person who put hands on my wife and child?" he asked the officers, voice trembling with anger. They nodded, and one officer said, "Yes, sir. She'll be charged with assault on arrival. We have multiple witnesses." The older woman attempted a feeble protest, eyes darting from Rami to the policeman. She provoked, but no one seemed inclined to indulge her excuses. And so she was led away, leaving Zawadi and Rami briefly alone with an officer who took a formal statement, scanning the bright red handprint across Zawadi's face with concern. Once the statement was completed, Rami guided his wife and baby through the private corridor that led to VIP immigration clearance. "I can't believe this happened," he said, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." "You aren't to blame," Zawadi whispered. "Some people harbor a sense of entitlement that makes them think they can treat others, especially mothers or people they consider outsiders, however they please." Rami's jaw tightened. "Still, the airline is my responsibility. Violence like that shouldn't happen on any flight, let alone ours. We're going to press charges and see she's held accountable." Zawadi offered a weak smile. "Thank you. But let's not let this overshadow everything. You've got the biggest business deal of your career finalizing today. I came here to support you." "I'll handle the business," Rami assured her gently. "But first, let's handle you and Tamika. Are you sure you're okay?" She nodded. "I'm bruised, but I'll manage." Her tears threatened again, but she held them back with remarkable poise, mindful of Tamika asleep against her. By the time they reached a sleek black sedan waiting outside, half a dozen airline executives hovered, wearing anxious expressions. They parted respectfully, allowing Rami to open the door for Zawadi. He slid in behind her, instructing the driver to take them to a reserved suite in a luxury hotel near the city center. "We can regroup," he said softly, settling Tamika in Zawadi's lap. "Then I'll head to the final negotiations." The next few hours passed in a swirl of phone calls, medical checkups, and official visits. The airline's legal team apologized profusely, promising full cooperation with the authorities. Zawadi's bruise was examined by a local physician and deemed non-serious, though she was advised to ice it and watch for swelling. Meanwhile, if you found yourself rooting for justice in this narrative, here's a moment to do something simple. Give this story a like and subscribe. Share your thoughts about standing up to bullies, especially when they think they can act above the law. Moments later, news started trickling across social media that an altercation on an Omani Air flight had led to an arrest. Word spread quickly in the business community. Rami's phone buzzed incessantly with messages. He had planned to finalize a crucial partnership deal that afternoon, but the assault on Zawadi threatened to overshadow the accomplishment. Yet, with Zawadi's encouragement, he carried on. "Go finalize your deal," she insisted, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "I'll be right here with Tamika. We'll both be fine. People need to see that we won't be deterred by hate." Rami studied her face, amazed by her resilience. "I'll hold a quick press briefing after the signing," he said, "just to address any questions. We'll keep it factual, that there was a passenger incident. You're okay. The airline has zero tolerance for harassment or violence." Zawadi nodded. "That sounds fair." They parted ways, and an airline representative escorted Zawadi to the top-floor suite so she could rest with Tamika. The little girl, perhaps sensing her mother's stress, drifted in and out of unsettled naps. Zawadi stroked her hair, recalling simpler times when her biggest worry was whether she'd arrive for a surgical rotation on time. Now, she was a wife, a mother, and a target of baseless discrimination, all in the span of a single day. Late that afternoon, Rami returned from the signing event, looking triumphant yet subdued. The deal, an expansion of Omani Air's cargo service across strategic West African hubs, had gone through perfectly. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, and he'd fielded questions about the in-flight assault with measured clarity. "I told them the truth," he said, sinking into the plush sofa in their suite. "That you were attacked unprovoked, and the airline is cooperating with local law enforcement. The media was sympathetic, especially seeing the mark on your face." He reached for her hand and squeezed gently. "How are you holding up?" "I'm coping," Zawadi answered. "It was terrifying in the moment, but I realize now how lucky I am to have had people step in." Rami's gaze flicked to Tamika, slumbering in a portable bassinet provided by the hotel. "And how's our little warrior?" Zawadi smiled, though sadness lingered. "She'll forget about it soon enough, I hope. Babies bounce back faster than adults." That evening, the pair ventured to a small celebratory gathering arranged by local colleagues. They arrived discreetly, trying to downplay the swirl of publicity. If not for the fading red imprint on Zawadi's cheek, no one would have guessed she'd been assaulted that very morning. Congratulatory handshakes and toasts abounded for Rami's successful partnership deal. Yet, whenever people approached Zawadi to inquire about her well-being, she responded graciously, her calm dignity underscoring how thoroughly she refused to be defined by the incident. "This is the attitude I admire," said Darius, a senior manager at the airline, who'd known Rami since he was a young pilot. "No intimidation can keep you from standing by your husband's side on an important day." Zawadi offered a thin but genuine smile. "We can't let fear or bigotry win." Overnight, the story gained traction online and across broadcast channels, not just for the sensational angle of a racist assault, but because of the high-profile nature of the victim. By dawn, the older white woman was identified as a retired business executive with a history of questionable behavior. She faced formal charges in Lubumbashi for endangering the welfare of a child and committing physical assault. The next morning, the local authorities conducted further interviews, gently apologizing to Zawadi for any inconvenience. "No inconvenience," she said. "It's important to see due process. People like her often rely on no one pressing charges, especially when they target folks they assume are powerless." After the official statements, Zawadi, exhausted but determined, prepared for the flight back to Accra. Rami arranged for them to depart on a chartered Omani airplane, wanting to spare her any additional public stress. Tamika, none the wiser to the drama, babbled with delight at the plush seats and spacious cabin. Zawadi noticed that her cheek, while still a bit tender, no longer burned. "Sometimes we turn adversity into a catalyst for bigger things," Rami reflected, settling next to her. "I've been thinking maybe we should accelerate our plans for that philanthropic initiative supporting African medical professionals who are parents. Remember? We discussed creating grants and child-friendly work environments." She nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, we wanted to help mothers in medicine. This incident reminds me how important it is to create a culture where caring for children is normal and never penalized." Rami reached over to stroke Tamika's tiny hand. "We can work on the legal aspects as soon as we land. My position at the airline can give us a platform to push for better family accommodations, on planes, in airports, in workplaces." That older woman's behavior was extreme, but subtle prejudice exists in so many corners of society. Zawadi felt a swell of purpose rise in her. "It will take time, but you're right. We have an opportunity to make real changes." Their flight ascended into bright, untroubled skies. While Tamika dozed in a cozy bassinet, Rami and Zawadi scrolled through messages of support from friends, colleagues, and acquaintances around the world. Donations to the philanthropic fund they'd only recently established had skyrocketed, likely sparked by public sympathy and outrage. As they watched the clouds drift beneath them, they found themselves sharing quiet gratitude that the baby was safe, and that adversity had, in a roundabout way, brought them a fresh commitment to advocate for the vulnerable. Arriving in Accra felt like a homecoming, despite the swirl of reporters and cameras in the arrivals area. Rami's personal security guided them through a side exit. Dusk light cast an amber glow over the tarmac as they emerged from the airport. "Mama, Mama," shouted a group of Omani Air staff who recognized Zawadi. Their voices chimed in genuine relief. She smiled, lifting Tamika briefly so they could see the baby's chubby cheeks. "We're fine," she assured them, gratitude tinging her voice. "Thank you for caring." Before the final drive back to their penthouse, Rami paused for a brief statement to the small cluster of journalists outside. With Zawadi beside him, Tamika snoozing, he spoke, "We want travelers everywhere to know that harassment and violence are never acceptable. My wife and daughter did not deserve the trauma inflicted by someone who believed they had the right to harm another passenger simply for existing. We will pursue justice through the courts, and we remain committed to making air travel a safe, inclusive experience for all." Cameras flashed. A flurry of questions followed. Zawadi, still dealing with residual exhaustion, simply pressed her face against Tamika's sleeping head. In the swirl of the crowd, she caught a glimpse of a televised news ticker featuring her own photograph. as well as an image of the older woman being led away by the police. The headline read, "Airline CEO's wife assaulted in shocking gate confrontation, suspect charged." She closed her eyes briefly, letting the moment settle. This was bigger than her. It was about every parent who'd been shamed for having a crying child, every traveler who'd faced discrimination because they didn't fit someone's expectations. A short car ride later, they were back in their penthouse apartment. Irene fussed over them, insisting Zawadi sit and rest. "I'll make you tea," she declared, disappearing into the kitchen. Tamika stirred awake, blinking at the familiar surroundings, as though she too was relieved to be home. Zawadi brushed a kiss across the baby's forehead. "Little one," she murmured, "we made it. We're safe." Rami watched them from across the room, hands in his pockets, face set in an expression of solemn pride. "We'll turn this ordeal into positive momentum," he said quietly. "You watch." Zawadi leaned back on the sofa, stroking Tamika's tiny hand. "Yes," she affirmed, the faint bruise on her cheek a testament to what they had endured. "We will." Their vow, spoken in the hush of a homecoming, carried the gravity of people who refused to let hate bury hope. Outside, the vibrant rhythm of Accra pulsed on, a symphony of urban life continuing as always. But within those walls, a resolve had been forged that would ripple far beyond a single incident, shaping dialogues on equality and family well into the future. If this story moves you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments how you'd stand up for someone who can't defend themselves. Because in the end, these stories aren't just about the shock of a single slap. They're about what we do next, how we press forward, how we choose unity over division, and how we refuse to let any hateful act define us. The tears, bruises, and heartbreak can't compete with an unwavering resolve to rise. And rise they will, mother and child held close by a father who cherishes them, forging a path of compassion in a world that sometimes forgets to be kind.